Buenas noches con todos. Brenda les invita a la tercera edición de Tech Talks aquí en el Ecuador. La noche de hoy hablaremos de Women in Technology o Mujeres en la Tecnología. Así que les va a ayudar por si están pensando qué quieren estudiar en la universidad o tal vez si ya están cursando alguna carrera relacionada con esta área y no saben qué se les va a venir en los próximos años en el ámbito laboral. O tal vez ya trabajan en tecnología y tenemos la perspectiva de dos mujeres con mucha experiencia en este ámbito para que vean todas las oportunidades que se pueden abrir. El día de hoy empezaremos con las exposiciones y luego haremos un foro de preguntas. Como esta es una charla de tecnología, no faltaba más que hacer preguntas a tiempo real. Vamos a usar Slido para esto. El hashtag del evento es Women in Tech y ahí podrán poner cualquier pregunta que tengan. Todos me imagino que tenemos aquí un celular. Nos podemos bajar la aplicación o si no, ingresar por medio del link que pueden ver ahí. Y ahora sí, sin más preámbulos, les presento a la vicepresidenta de tecnología, Liz Spranzini, y a la líder de innovación y desarrollo, Nicole Johnson. Un aplauso, por favor.
Thank you, Isabel. Hello, everyone. Thank you for coming today and joining us. My name is Liz Franzani. I'm the SVP of Development at Verndale. This is Nicole Johnson. She's the VP of Business Analysis and Research and Development at Verndale. Verndale is a customer experience agency. We have offices in both the US and here in Quito. And we are in town. We are in town visiting our office, and we thought this would be a great opportunity to speak about this topic. Last year, I had the opportunity to join several women in our space speaking about this topic at a conference. It was very interesting for me to learn about the experiences of other women, and I came to a lot of realizations about my own journey. So I realized, instead of just talking about it, if I wanted to try to make an impact in it, I needed to start getting out there and talking about it as well to other people. And I felt that we had a unique opportunity here, if we were going to be coming here, to speak to you all and maybe reach out and hit upon a point that maybe you haven't heard a lot about yet. And so that's why we're here today talking about women in technology. So today's discussion, we're going to talk just a little bit about Verndale and who we are. We're going to talk about why we think this matters. Why do we have to talk about this? We're going to talk about the benefits for organizations in thinking about this. We're going to talk about the history a little bit about women in tech. Talk a little bit about the barriers and the bias that do exist. Talk about personal life, balance. And then finally, how we can inspire and encourage others. So first, a little bit about Verndale. Verndale is a customer experience agency. We exist to help brands grow by creating and optimizing the best digital experiences for their own consumers. We were founded in 1998. We have 3 locations, 2 in the US, and again, 1 here in Quito. We have over 115 teammates, and over 30 of those are women. Our clients, you'll see some brands up here that you probably recognize. We've worked with Honeywell, Honda, Carnival Cruise Lines, Taco Bell, SeaWorld, Stanley Black & Decker, Mitsubishi Electric, and these are just some of them. So I mentioned that there's over 30 women here at Verndale. This is just an example of some of those women. We've got women in technology. And really, I mean, Verndale is a technology company. So every woman that works at Verndale is in technology. So you can see a smattering of that here. We've got technical architects, technical leads, programmers, front-end engineers, quality assurance engineers. We've got business analysts. We've got leaders, directors, VPs of various departments. So myself, again, I'm the head of the development department, and that's both engineering as well as QA. That's front-end and back-end engineering. I have 2 bachelor degrees in computer science and psychology from Boston College. I have over 20 years of industry experience. My roles have included engineer, technical lead, technical architect. I've had 9 years as a developer, 7 years as a technical project leader, and 4 years in my current role as the leader of these departments. For those of you who are already in development, you might recognize some of the skills I've acquired over the years, primarily programming in .NET C#, MVC, T-SQL, JavaScript, and then platforms including Visual Studio, content management systems such as Sitecore, Episerver, and Rocco, Contentful, CRMs such as Salesforce. And my technology focuses, expertises that I've grown over the years have to do with internationalization, planning for multilingual and global strategies, search strategies, data strategies, content migration, CMS architecture. So as you can see, I've grown up in this background.
Hi everybody. My name is Nicole Johnson. My name is Nicole Johnson, and I lead our technical business analysis and research and development team at Vermeil. I started off really getting into technology in high school, where I really just decided to open up my computer and see what was inside. So I didn't really get into software until college. I was really focused on hardware and networking before that, building computers and things like that. So I went to Northeastern University and studied information science and finance, and that's when I started to learn the software end, how to code, and really what it meant to be a VA. I started off my career as a developer at Citigroup, the big bank, if anybody's heard of it, and then I transitioned to more business analysis. I really enjoy more of the requirements gathering and the analysis on the data and the data structures to build efficiencies, make things faster, cheaper, better. And so that's where I kind of want to take my career. So I've definitely gone down a little bit of a different path there. I currently lead the team of VAs, as I mentioned, and I have some of the platform knowledge as well that you see listed here. So I'm going to go over a couple of roles in tech that we have here at Verndale. It's not an exhaustive list, but it's really just to kind of educate everybody on just because it's technology doesn't mean it's development. And so we all know about development. You're coding, you're programming, you're building out the features, whether it's front end or back end. Analysis are those BAs that I talked about, really gathering requirements, understanding the requirements, and working with the developers and other members of the team to develop the solutions. Quality assurance, they're really kind of the first users of the product that we're putting out there. And so it's not just testing, but it's also, they want to ensure that the users are having the best quality as well. So, there's definitely bugs and things like that and retesting, but they really are the first users before our product goes to market. And then we have project management, really important role. They kind of, corral the rest of the team. But they really need to have an understanding of all of the activities and the deliverables that need to actually execute the project. And they manage those priorities and make sure that the team has what they need to be able to execute. And so they really are, at the end of the day, problem solvers. They jump in there and help all of us really figure out what the issues are and make sure that the rest of the team has what they need to succeed. Design. Can't forget about design. You don't really think that this is more of a technology role, but it is. There's a lot about the information architecture, how things are actually laid out for the users. They do a lot of usability testing to understand the best ways, the best colors, fonts, imagery, to really entice the user and get them to accomplish what we're looking for them to accomplish. Infrastructure. So this really has to do with kind of the hardware that I was talking about before. The servers, the environments, the networking, making sure the security is set up properly, any firewalls. They're a big part of the project team as well. And then we have digital marketing. They're really there to analyze the data of what users are doing and suggest ways to improve it, whether that's through personalization, improving SEO, and they're really there to look at the data and iterate and then help us improve so that we put something out there in the market, but we always want to make sure that we're improving and iterating. So why does this matter? Why are we talking about women in technology? And one of the biggest things is because we're lagging behind. In the United States, 18% of US computer science graduates are women.
and only 20% of the computer science jobs are held by women. But women make up half of the workforce. And just a couple months ago, there were 700,000 open positions that weren't filled. And in Ecuador, only 12% of the women are in technology, and that's a crazy statistic. So we believe that these numbers are really driven by the lack of education about what tech jobs are, and the perception of what the tech jobs are. You see on the TV shows and the movies that you watch, a lot of the times it's a young boy or a young man, coding in the basement in the dark, and that perception isn't reality. I mentioned the roles before. And there's also really a lack of awareness about the great things that women are doing in technology. Everybody knows the story of Steve Jobs and Mark Zuckerberg, but Liz is going to talk a little bit about other women as well. So why should women consider a career in technology? There are many advantages. You see some of the things listed here. The average salaries of technology jobs are a lot higher than any other industry. That's a big driver. Technology is also always changing, so it's a possibility to always keep learning. If that's a big part of what you desire and always learn, you'll be able to, the growth opportunities are infinite, because tomorrow there's going to be a new job in that list of slides that I just showed, and there's going to be new technologies out there to learn and new expertise. So overall, we're here to help raise awareness and encourage women to choose a career in technology. As a minority gender in technology, women can feel isolated and as though they're different. And this really leads women to leave the field as well. And we really must do what we can do to help the fight. You may not be aware that the bias exists around you or in the workplace, but we shouldn't ignore it. But rather, we're here to educate people so you can recognize it and help make a change. Well, what are some of the benefits that an organization can have with bridging the gender gap? Simply put, women are great for business. Companies with more gender diversity have more revenue, more customers, and more market share and profits. And that's really because women help to provide a different perspective to help lead ideas and solve problems. It promotes a better understanding of the difference in culture and beliefs. Women also tend to be more empathetic, which helps to improve relationships among customers, other employees, and partners. Also, women know other women, so they have the advantage to be able to market better to female audiences and customers. But before we go any further,
thank you, Nicole. So before we go any further, something that comes up a lot, and especially as I've started to talk about this more, I actually get a lot of questions about, do we really have to talk about this? And, I'm not sure about Ecuador, but I know in the US, we've definitely made a lot of strides. So I think there's a perception maybe that there's not an issue anymore. Except that all of the sentiments that you see up here have actually either been in the news relatively recently or said to me directly. Tech jobs aren't well suited for women's personalities. It's a biology thing. We shouldn't lower our hiring standards just to have more women. There are no more barriers for women in tech. Actually, my husband said that to me like a few days ago. That's smart. Why should women have their own groups and movements in tech? Because isn't that in and of itself sexist? There's no gender bias at my company because we have plenty of women on staff and even in tech and leadership roles. The fact that these things are there are a reason to talk about it. And so the short answer is yes, we do need to still talk about it, because when we talk about gender in the workplace and technology, it forces us to acknowledge those differences while trying to achieve the goal of being treated the same. My husband actually, he reviewed this with me, and he thought this next line was a little harsh and that maybe I should take it out, but I kind of felt it was important because I think that men may be unaware of the benefits they enjoy simply because they're men, and this can make them blind to some of the challenges that women face. I don't think that's being aggressive. I think that just could be a fact. So I want to talk just a little bit first about the history of women in technology. because it's pretty cool. Did you know that women were pioneers in writing software for digital computers in the 1940s in the US? The electronic numerical integrator and computer, one of the first computers, was a behemoth. It was over 30 tons and over 17,000 vacuum tubes. At the time, men in the computing industry regarded writing code as actually secondary. Software was secondary. It was less interesting. They were more focused on the hardware. And so women programmed it to execute all the instructions. In fact, an interesting little stat is that Betty Snyder Holbertson invented the concept of the breakpoint. So anyone who's a developer in the room will know what that means. And so she invented that so she could debug a program that wasn't running correctly. And someone said to me, isn't that classic that a woman is stopping for directions where the man is supposed to just keep going. So in the 1960s in the US, 27% of the computer science degrees were held by women. Women were showing more interest. As we headed into the early 1980s, 37% were held by women, but this is where it peaked. And then in 2010, and really through today, it stayed stagnant. 18% of computer science degrees are held by women. And this is obviously a sharp downward turn. So why? Why less women? So first, just a little note about Carnegie Mellon University. You may not have heard of it, but it's a really well-renowned private research university in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. It's currently ranked at number 25 in 2019 US News Best National Universities, and it's known for its program in science and technology. So Alan Fisher was the Associate Dean of Computer Science School at Carnegie Mellon University, and he wanted to know why there was less. It was actually really extreme there. It was like only 7% of women, and this was in the mid-90s. And so he wanted to know why, and he engaged with a woman named Jane Margolis to understand what was happening. She was a social scientist, and she's now a senior researcher at the UCLA School of Education and Information Studies. So she started this study, and she found that university students received an early exposure to programming growing up in the 80s. So remember, this is like the 90s, right? So anyone who's growing up in the early 80s, that's when they were starting to go to university. So when these students arrived at universities in the late 80s, they were already proficient programmers. These future computer science students were exposed to computers at home. So the rise of the personal computer in the US in those early 80s. The thing is that most of those computer science students that had that early exposure, they were men. Until this point, there had been little exposure, so everyone was on equal footing and brand new to programming. So they were all getting into college, total novices, and now men were coming in and already having a foot up. So they were already in their classes, like getting better grades and understanding it better. And women began to feel pushed out. There was a perception that developed that if you weren't obsessively coding for years or not in front of a computer 24/7, then you're not dedicated enough. It's not really the right field for you to be in. So why didn't women receive that same, early exposure? Well, the study found that it was because of what was going on in their home life. Often the family computer was put in the son's room. Daughters picked up that their mothers weren't really engaged with computers. Boys were sort of cheered on for playing with construction sets and electrical kits, but girls were pushed towards their dolls and their toy kitchens. And the same message was happening at school. Computers are for boys. And interestingly, at school, the boys who maybe didn't fit in, they weren't the jocks or the guys into sports, they formed computer clubs. They could find their own group, but guess what? Intentionally or not, they were reproducing that same exclusion behavior. So the study found, though, that women have the talent and capability to code. Many of the ones that were dropping out of these programs were actually perfectly good and getting great grades, and they were actually top performers. But those who stuck with it, those who stayed beyond those first couple of years, they caught up to those who had a head start. And usually, by their third year at the university. So something could be done to better enable this success. Having that prior experience didn't mean that it was a predicator that they were going to be the best. So Carnegie Mellon decided in the late 90s to address this problem head on. They did a few different things. The first thing is class structure. They grouped the students by experience. So those coming in that already had experience, they didn't put them necessarily in the same classes as the novices. That way the novices didn't feel the pressure that they weren't already, up to snuff. They added more tutoring for all students. They decided to incorporate sort of real world. They modified the courses to show how code could impact the real world. They also, went after the faculty mindset. Stop assuming that previous experience is going to equal that raw ability, and that new coders could bloom just as well as the people who were doing it when they got into school. And then admissions, stop giving a lot of preference to those, teen coders. So they did all these things, and but did it really make a difference? The result was that women entering Carnegie Mellon's computer science program shortly thereafter increased from 7% to 42%. Graduation rates rose to almost nearly match, and now the computer science class of 2021 is 51% women. And remember, this is an institution known for its computer science programs. It's they can't have these women just come in and not be at the very top of their game. So the simple truth is that at the end of the day, gender-based affirmative action doesn't mean companies are hiring incompetent employees or admitting undeserving students. It means they're just correcting for factors of societal discrimination that are keeping competent women out of the tech industry. If women aren't even getting in the door, you're not even getting those women there. So I want to talk a little bit about the barriers and the bias, and the goal of this is just to sort of educate, what's out there and what maybe you don't think about, or even for some women, maybe you're not even thinking about it or realizing it, but it's like gnawing at you when you're in, when you're at your place of work. The first thing is that personality and biology actually is a factor. But it's not because women aren't well suited for math or coding logic. I mean, actually, women's minds tend to be very precise, detail-oriented. They're great at following a complex list of directions. I mean, how many women here create a list for their husband, things that they need done around their house, There's evidence predating technology that can be seen in women's, early women's tasks like knitting, weaving, cooking, following recipes, juggling and tracking all the household duties. And as I just talked about, in the early years of programming, women were prominent. And the work back then was even harder. It was uncharted new field. The math was binary and hexadecimal, and there wasn't an internet where you could Google and find the answers to your issues. And also, if you look at some of the other countries out there, India, Malaysia, you're actually seeing a ratio of students that's a lot higher. 40% in India, 52% in Malaysia. If biology was really limiting women's ability, that just simply wouldn't exist there. But where does personality and biology factor in? Because it does. And I believe that it's because women have to change their natural tendencies to overcome the stereotypes and societal expectations that we're talking about here. So I have a few examples of that. Perfectionism. Women often strive for perfection. Men tend to be more brave and confident. That results in men, getting the opportunities more often. They're putting themselves out there more often. It doesn't always mean the best person for the job is getting it, only maybe the one who's most confident. A lack of aggression. Women are less likely to play outside the rules, interrupt others, take someone else's turn. Lack of risk-taking. As young girls, women are discouraged from taking risks and advocating for themselves. Men will apply for jobs when they meet 60, 70% of the bullet points in the rec. But women are like, I have to meet all 100% of that. That one I'm not, I guess I shouldn't apply for that job. There's also a communal need to please in a few different ways. Women often will not put themselves first and rather try to do what's best for the group. They'll more likely attribute their success to external factors or share the credit. And again, this is somewhat generalizing, but They've found in studies that men will more often explain their success and credit to themselves and their own innate qualities. There's an element of self-doubt. Like I said, these barriers, they're not like men necessarily pushing women down, but it's women holding themselves back. They'll judge their own performance as worse than it actually is, while men might judge their performance better. There's even a name for this. It's called the imposter syndrome, where a capable person is plagued with the fear of being discovered as a fraud. You don't have the technical chops to do it. I really shouldn't be here. I shouldn't be up here talking about this, So, and also internalizing social cues. Women will silence themselves in order to adhere to what a society deems appropriate. There's an element of prove it. It's there. Women have to prove themselves technically capable to a far greater extent because it sort of breaks those stereotypes. So there's this extra burden to avoid the questions and to prove those technical decisions. And there's the fear that if you express a little bit of ignorance, no matter how trivial, maybe she isn't wired to do this work. Maybe it's not in her biology. And this isn't just, in our heads. There's a 2011 McKinsey report that notes that, men are more often promoted based on potential, while women are promoted based on past accomplishments. And there's a bit of isolation. When you're a minority at a workplace, any kind of minority, not just women, you feel like, you're maybe not connecting as well to other people or have someone to confide in or look up to, and that will affect your confidence and maybe hold you back from contributing. So that's like workplace challenges. There's also some home challenges. Guilt. I feel it. I don't know about anybody else, but I feel it when it's been ingrained that since childhood, I'm supposed to take care of my family. And so when I choose work over family, it results in like an internal struggle, as well as, potentially a judgment by others. Some women, may even compromise career goals because of partners or children that don't exist yet. They're not even married yet, but they think, I can't take that kind of job because I'm going to get married in 3 years, I hope, And so they're holding themselves back from even getting there. There's also primary caregivers. Women still do the vast majority of childcare, even if they are working. As a result, when you become a parent as a woman, it decreases your workforce participation. But that doesn't necessarily happen for men. If there's rigid work schedules or a lack of paid family leave or expensive or the childcare you can't depend on, it's derailing women's best efforts no matter how hard they're trying. So there's this stereotype conundrum, and this is where I feel like it's kind of interesting to bring my psychology studies back into play here. There are lifetimes and generations of expectations for the roles that women should be playing. And it doesn't just simply go away because in your mind you want it to, or once you're in the workplace. We evaluate people based on how well they match our stereotypes. So the stereotypes of men being providers, decisive and driven, women are caregivers, sensitive and communal. So therefore, there's this conundrum where a woman's professional advancement depends on her career focus and taking credit. But that violates our stereotypes of what women should be. And this results in this core of gender bias, whether people admit it or not, or whether they realize it or not. A man who doesn't help, he's just busy. But if a woman doesn't help, maybe she's selfish. Women that are confident, they're told they're being too aggressive. Whereas men are just being assertive. There's the idea of office housekeeping tasks, and I've even seen, I've seen this, and in a group of men and women of equal role and responsibility. I'm not talking about people who were hired, for this purpose, but people of equal role and responsibility. They'll often more often than not, the women will end up being tasked either by themselves or by other people with ideas such as ordering lunch and getting coffee, organizing meetings, taking notes. I don't know how many people have tried to set up an Outlook meeting for like 15 people, but it takes forever. Women have been raised to be compliant, people-pleasing, self-sacrificing, nurturing, communal. Men have been raised to expect that. So a woman might even be offering, hey, you're in a room, you're sitting down at a table, a woman would be like, oh, I'll take the notes, don't worry about it. But even if the woman in the room is actually the best one, the most organized one, the one who's great at taking the notes, that doesn't mean she should be. Because while women are organizing that stuff, they're missing out on opportunities doing this housework that they could be spending training, learning something valuable, doing something that's going to earn them a raise or promotion. Probably the fact that they're the best at taking the notes is not going to earn them that raise or that promotion. This is inadvertent. I don't necessarily think we're in a world of people who are like, well, that's what the woman should be doing. I don't think they really intend for it. It just kind of happens. I thought this was kind of interesting. I was doing a little bit of research. I ran into this riddle. A father and son have a car accident and both are badly hurt. They are both taken to separate hospitals. When the boy is taken in for an operation, the surgeon says, I can't do the surgery because this is my son. How is this possible? Well, in the context of this conversation, probably everyone knows that the answer is because the surgeon is the boy's mother. But believe it or not, this is like a brain teaser. People are like, oh my God, I didn't even think of that. That's crazy, I'm stumped. And that is actually really well showing where sort of this inadvertent bias and sort of what's subconsciously in our brains has a real effect. Now, bias. I was thinking about this recently, and I think many organizations, they recognize the benefit of having women not only involved, but in important roles, technical roles, leadership roles, and if you ask them, they're going to say, there's no bias here. But I feel like inherently it's untrue because human nature, like our ability to be successful in the world and survive, is the ability to quickly categorize things, make assumptions, jump to conclusions. It's what allows us, to process situations quickly. So there are centuries and generations of expectations to overcome. The only way to overcome, when our brains are doing that, and the stereotypes just come naturally because that's what allows us to process it, then once a gender bias comes out of that, the only way to overcome it is to acknowledge it, be aware of it, and fight it. So how do we do that? Overcome bias. And the single most important way to overcome gender bias is to acknowledge it, raise awareness about it, and actually be super definitive that it is not acceptable. When people realize that an unacceptable bias is widespread, they're going to be more likely to overcome them. The simple act of talking openly about these behavioral patterns is going to make the subconscious conscious. And institutions and individuals can correct for this behavior by encouraging, promoting, and championing more women. And I think Carnegie Mellon is a great example of what they did there. It probably didn't cost that much to make all of those updates that they made. It was just a mindset change and a focus. So some of the things that we can do, that you can do, is be welcoming. Consider activities and conversational topics that can be enjoyed by all and ensure that inclusiveness. Have an open forum. Give everyone a chance to speak. Leave openings in the conversation. Apply a no interruption policy. Adopt practices that focus less on the speaker and more on the ideas. If someone isn't as confident or not quite as pushy, maybe they have fantastic ideas, but if you don't stop and say, hey, what do you think? You know what, you might not ever get that idea. Consider personalities. Encourage and enable the best people for the role. Proactively reach out to push people, and don't confuse confidence with capability. Support your female colleagues. Introduce, talk up, and support your female counterparts in their successes. If you're talking to clients or you're talking to other colleagues or whoever, mention that great success that somebody recently had. See something, say something. It's not enough to just be aware of your own actions, but if you see a woman either inadvertently or purposefully being excluded or whatnot, do something about it. Say something about it. Provide flexible working conditions. Look, not every job we can say, hey, you can change the hours that you work, or don't worry about that. Some jobs it's going to be required, but if you can, allow for flexible working conditions and also enable a family to enable those family and home duties. And then rotate those communal responsibilities. Don't penalize a woman who doesn't sacrifice for those tasks. So be cognizant, who are you asking to do those office house tasks? And volunteer more. And rotate it. Okay, at this meeting you're going to take the notes. Okay, at this meeting you're going to take the notes, that sort of thing. A life balance is going to be really important. I mean, it's really hard. The first pillar here is support. Women, don't be afraid to ask your family and your husbands or partners for that support. And be honest with your managers and your work environment about what your family needs are. Don't be afraid to ask for some of that time. You'd be surprised at how you probably would get it. Men, proactively offer that support and share in the household duties with your wives. And in the office, acknowledge that there might be that pressure for your coworker. But it's also important to note that if we're going to support women in this way, you need to support the men too, right? The stereotypes exist in the other direction. Whereas a man might not be looked on as much of a man if they're staying home with their kids or helping out more there. So we need to support them in that endeavor, both our colleagues and also our partners. Get organized. When you're juggling all your work responsibilities and then coming home and then juggle all your home responsibilities, the best way to do it is approach your personal life in the same way that you might do your projects at school or at work. Start the day and the week by discussing with your family. What are they? Have a scrum. What activities are going on and who's going to be doing what? Leverage a calendar and to-do list apps. You wouldn't believe the to-do list app. I got an app that when I put it in, it's super pervasive. It constantly pings my husband about the things that it needs to do, and I can have it remind him every hour. Acceptance. None of us are perfect. Change your goal from this sort of impossible perfection to embracing choices that result in happiness and satisfaction. Don't fear failure and understand it's going to lead to learning how to be better and gaining confidence and strength. And then inspire and encourage, because honestly, I think a lot of what this comes down to is getting the younger people, the younger women, more involved here and understanding, both from an educational perspective about what the diversity and options are, but also getting them to actually play around with this stuff, right? So first, educating young women about the tech opportunities. Find a way to talk to women about tech before they make their career decisions. Promote STEM programs. Help women see that you don't need to be afraid to get out of your comfort zone. You don't have to be 100% to try it. You don't have to be obsessed with math and science to get into the technology areas. I was actually more of an English person. I got my best grades in English and history classes, not in the math classes. The industry, as Nicole pointed out, is super diverse. There's so many different areas to get into, and there's so many job opportunities that have environments that accept women and treat them equally. And I mean, those job opportunities. 700,000 jobs in the U.S. that pay really, really well. I mean, it's just crazy. I have friends who are in certain industries where they just keep going back to school for more and more and more certifications, and they get this much of a raise. But in technology, the sky is literally the limit. You have to be a role model and a mentor and a supporter. So you need to pay it forward to the next generation. And every single woman in technology should feel the responsibility to talk about it with other people and provide support. Talk about it with your nieces, with your daughters. Show them what you do. We don't always, when we go to family gatherings, talk about what we do, but talk about it. Let them know that it's there, and be a mentor to a woman. And that's not just advice to women, that's to men. Men can be mentored to women. Some of those best mentor relationships are between men and women. Create programs at your organization or elsewhere that provide support and encouragement for women. And managers, try to remember, again, that the best person for the job might not be pushing their way in, and it's your loss if you don't find a way to enable them. This graphic, it's a little bit small here, but what I found was pretty interesting is what sort of affects students, female students, as they're going through and what might get them more encouraged to get into the computer industry. So just understanding about computing could be for girls, and getting exposure to it really affects them in junior high. And then once they get to high school, they might be more impacted by isolation, and not thinking that it's maybe the right thing for them, or maybe there's just no education around it. And then once they get into a college, it starts to become positive again when they have inspiring teachers and positive role models. And then again, there's some programs that support girls in this. So Girls Who Code, maybe you've heard of it. It spearheads a mission to close that gender gap. So there's programs for girls to learn, for support that clears pathways from like middle and high school into the computing workforce. It actually teaches them some computer science skills early on. There's a program called Tech Girl, and it's a program aimed to spark interest in girls by actually bringing them into an office environment and learning some basic coding practices. And then I even found that there's Girls in Tech Ecuador, which is a nonprofit organization dedicated to identifying, connecting, and giving visibility to women who are in the technology sector here. So I advise getting into that as well. And I think just stepping back, getting into technology, and I'm going to talk a little bit about coding because that's where I'm from. It's really exciting, fun, and worth the effort. It's fun. Human beings love to play games. They work on brain teasers. They solve puzzles in their personal time. I don't know about here, but in the U.S. we have something called escape rooms where they lock you in a room and with a bunch of friends, and you need to figure out in an hour how to get out without dying. I mean, they don't actually try to kill you, but it's fun. And some of these little puzzles you see on the sides here, I'm sure everyone's played with that sort of stuff before. Imagine doing that all day long and getting paid really, really well for it. One of my colleagues actually recently told me that front-end coding was like playing in a playground for adults. There's never a dull moment while programming. I mean, it definitely is not, I'm not trying to say it's easy, but it's exhilarating to hit that eureka moment after working through a really hard problem on a complex piece of logic and suddenly having it work. And honestly, people who code simply love their jobs. I mean, they just do. And I think that alone should be inspiration for girls to get into it more. So to sum up, the goal here was to inspire more girls to take up tech. So I wanted to potentially get to some of those younger people, to some of those people who maybe didn't pick their major yet for college, or to maybe inspire you to again talk to the younger girls in your lives about this more, and to educate about all the different diversity of options. And again, it isn't just coding, but there's so many things. And also, the second part of it is to educate people in the workplace about how they can support women and enable them to be successful. Understand what some of those barriers are, internal or external, that they might be struggling with, even though they don't realize it. And just in general, bring this topic of women in technology more to the forefront of everybody's minds. That's it. Thank you.
Recuerden que todavía pueden votar por la pregunta que más les guste y también pueden todavía hacer preguntas. So I'll be translating the first question. So
thank you. I could say hola. I apologize. I can't do much more than that.
Okay, so what can I do to motivate my daughter and see if she's interested in technology if she's still a toddler?
That's a great question. My daughter's 4. My husband is also a programmer, so this is definitely top of mind for us. I think the first thing is just, again, puzzles, what I talked about before. Getting them involved in anything that involves logic. So there's tons of computer games out there that are aimed at toddlers that could be involved with logic. Anything that might be a decision-making process, or just, again, something like those little games where it's like, how do you separate these two pieces, or just put a puzzle together. There's toys. So Fisher-Price has a toy called a Codapillar. And it's pretty cool. I got it for her when she was like 1, so there's no way she was using it yet. But my husband and I would play with it. And it's got these little segments, and the segment represents a left turn, a right turn, a straight ahead. And so what you do is you have all these different segments and you plug it all into the Codapillar, and the idea is that you've got like a little disc that you can put on the other side of the room, and then you need to figure out how to put all the pieces onto the Codapillar so that when you turn it on, it makes the turns and everything that it needs to do so that it stops on top of the little disc. So, I mean, that's one example. And then another example, you know, as they get a little bit older, is again just to have, you know, talk about it. Just talk about it more. You know, I'm hoping that there's going to be more media about it. You know, expose them to videos, expose them to mentors or family members, whoever who are involved in coding.
Thank you very much. Next question, I don't know, Nicole, if you want to answer this one. Do you think part of what discourages women from entering the tech world is the lack of support from other women?
I do. I think that's a part of it. I don't think that's it's everything, but I do think so. I think about my own past experiences and, you know, going to computer classes in high school, being the only girl in the room, and really, you know, that was really hard. And so not having anybody else around me, not having a lot of friends that really were interested. Even when I went to college, we started off in the class, I think over 300, and there were about 20 women in that 300 class when we started. So yeah, I do think it's a big impact. And so I think it is important to reach out to some of these groups that Liz had talked about and start to create our own groups. And I can even be better myself in helping women in technology and reaching out throughout.
There's also a little bit of a competitive aspect to it where if you're the only woman and then there's another only woman that enters, you feel like you need to compete with each other and maybe even put each other down. It actually happens a lot with women who work and have a family and women who only have a family because they feel defensive to each other, right? So the woman who's staying at home feels like they have to defend why they are staying at home and not going out and getting a job. And the woman who's trying to do both needs to try to defend why she's trying to do both. And then they end up putting each other down about it because they're feeling their own insecurities. And so we need to be aware that you feel that way and don't do that to each other.
Next question. So, what has been the most difficult situation you've had to encounter to deal with your male counterparts? Does that make sense? Like any situation that you've had a hard time managing?
I don't know that I necessarily. So I admittedly have worked from home for a good part of my life. I moved away from Boston 4 years after I started, and I've worked from home. So I think gender has been a little less because it hasn't been as in my face. But I think that as I moved into more of a leadership role, I started to feel that more because in our company, sort of on our executive leadership team, I'm now the only woman, and I feel like that's sometimes a little bit intimidating because I feel like I don't necessarily have the same strengths and strategy and whatnot, and I feel like maybe others do, and so I feel like I need to get myself out there, and again, it comes from like a confidence, wanting, just having to put my ideas out there. I have talked to other, again, I've talked to a lot of other women who have been exposed, and I think it's, for some of them, the hardship has been more of that prove it mentality where they feel like they have something more to prove, and when they try to talk about whether being a woman impacts it, they then get more flack because they brought it up in that way, and they're told, well, if you want to be one of us, then stop talking about being a woman. So I think it's just a combination of some of those things.
Thank you. And this is a special question. It says, from the women that work in the Quito office, can one of them share their experience in the world of technology and say any similarities with what has already been taught from the U.S. office?
So do any of the women at Verndale and Quito want to come up here and say something?
Sometimes I have a question myself about the decision that I made about studying computer engineering because I thought that maybe that was not the area for me, but now I'm not concerned at all. I'm proud of what I did because I know that I'm on an industry that's going to be driving me to the best place that I can be. And I would like to get like on the path like you guys did. I started as a developer. I was a business analyst. I got promoted. I was a coordinator on a group of business analysts on the public organization. And so I think that I'm not done on my path. And I feel like I can do so much better. Just like maybe what we can do is just hand-holding the little girls while they're deciding what to study. Because I didn't would choose to study computer engineering if my aunt didn't do it. So I saw that she was doing it, and so I thought it was so cool. And then I started to see my path, and I love what I do. I wouldn't change it. But I do think that we can do a lot of stuff to just promote more people and more women to go to the levels that you guys are. So I'm very proud that you guys are here because you're like the executives and like the leaders of our company among a lot of interesting people. But I do love that in the company you guys are here and you're driving us to where I want to be and my female coworkers would like to be. So thank you so much. And
thank you. As working at Verndale, I've been working at Verndale for 18 years. And I started out, as I said, as a developer. And I mentioned I moved away from Boston. I moved back to New Jersey, and I was a developer. So I mean, big deal. Didn't matter where I was doing it. And I would actually like to thank Chris and Sean, who are the CEO and CTO of our company, because they didn't have to encourage me to move into a leadership role at this company. I worked from home. I mean, how do you manage a department of 50, 60 people if you're not in an office? But it wasn't. I didn't necessarily go to them and say, "Hey, I want to be the leader of development." They saw promise in me, and they reached out to me and said, "We want you in this role. We think you could do a great job. So we're going to work towards it with you to get you there." And that's what they did. And so that's exactly the sort of thing that we need more men and more people doing. So thank you, guys.
I mean, there's other questions here. If
Cool.
you want to keep going.
Yeah.
Okay. Translation's hard. Okay.
Why are there more women in QA and project management than men? What do you think about that?
It's a good question. QA, I think that it could really go either way with QA. I mean, project management, I can't speak to the QA stat necessarily, but I would say project management, again, goes along the lines of like maybe what women's roles versus men's roles traditionally are, and that, it's organizing, it's keeping track of schedules, it's sort of keeping things in line, it's making sure that people are doing what they're supposed to be doing. I think we see that that happens in the home life as well. So I think it's potentially falling into some of those stereotypes too.
And on the quality assurance side, I really do think it's about precision and accuracy, and I think that really lends more to the women's personality as well.
Or maybe that's just a stereotype that people have, and men have precise minds and should be trying to use it more. And they feel intimidated because they don't know if they're precise because their wives are telling them they're not.
Okay, so actually now that we've talked so much about women, this actually goes the other way around. What would you like to see men doing to support women in technology?
Yeah, I would say that one of the things that I think would be really great for men to do is a lot more of the mentorship and training as well, and kind of partnering up with a woman maybe as a colleague or otherwise, and helping out with training, and also encouraging their women colleagues to actually speak up and voice their ideas to the forefront.
I think being aware and talking up your female colleagues is a big one. I think that sometimes, maybe everyone in here has an open mind, but there's definitely people out there that don't. there are definitely people out there who believe that it is biology and women aren't wired to do it. And it's hard to have confrontational conversations, and so maybe it's easier for you to have somebody say that and just ignore it. And just go about your business. But I think it's really important for you to stop it the second that you see it. So I think that's probably one of the most important things.
Okay, and given that it's almost an hour, I'll finish with 2 more questions. So the first one is, what major in universities would you recommend students to take in order to be in technology? Is it only computer science?
So, no. So I actually didn't major in computer science. I majored in information science, which was more about the logic of how the systems fit together, how they work, how the data gets transformed, and less about the actual coding that happens. So that's definitely, I think, a good major if you're interested more in that field as well.
And I think, when I was in school, if you didn't even get to take a web class as a computer science major. There was one web class, and it was only for communications majors. And I'm sure that's changed. But actually, I have a nephew who is doing computer science, and I went and looked through his and his all the different types of classes he could take. And I didn't see a lot of web classes there either. So I would say that you could enter through there through other means, whether it's communications, through marketing, and sort of enter in through that route as well.
I would also encourage, not just in the major as well, but there are also other classes out there online if you want to focus on something, maybe mobile development or anything of the sort. And you can get certifications, and they don't necessarily have to be a university degree. And I think that will also help to take steps into your technology career.
Last one. I chose one that's in English first one. Okay, so the latest generations of women have been exposed to technology since youth, and yet they are still oriented for CS careers. What is still missing?
So I think you've especially seen in the last 2 years or so, like an explosion in this topic. I mean, it's at the forefront. Everyone's talking about it. I'm hoping that it is making a difference. I mean, these girls are still only maybe 9, 10, 11 years old or younger. So I think that it wasn't until recently, and now it's really getting out there and getting exposure. So I'm hoping that it's already underway, and we may just not see it for a little while longer. And then I think it's still a matter of, it's in the media and you're seeing it, but that doesn't mean it's necessarily day to day, right? So in countries like this or anywhere, in the world, we need to keep talking about it. Don't stop talking about it, just keep talking about it, because I think it will really start to make an impact now.
Okay. Any final things that you want to say? Or if you want to keep going, I can keep going.
Just to go back to the previous question about other majors, and I totally just thought of it now, but marketing as well. Marketing is actually going really into the technology realm, and so I think that if you have an interest in marketing, that's also going to really have a lot of opportunities in technology and at technology companies.
And data science is actually, I know you mentioned it a little bit, but there's majors in data science now. Data is huge right now, especially with the way data is being collected. Big data, you might have heard of big data. How you then use that data to make great decisions for different, organizations. There's a lot of artificial intelligence in there too. So that in and of itself is turning into its own areas of focus for study.
Tomorrow there'll be something new too. So.
Okay, gracias a todos por venir.